Hello and welcome to the AuctionsPlus presentation on Bid the Grid. My name is Anna Adams and I will be giving you an introduction to grid selling for producers. The AuctionsPlus Bid the Grid platform is an auction platform targeted at specific buyers who want to compete based on their own specifications and apply discounts to any stock falling outside of these specifications. Primarily, these buyers will be processors, feedlots and exporters. The auction system is used as a best price determination. This is determined by taking into consideration the specifications of the stock, what discounts will be applied at the time by the purchaser, and also the price that they are willing to bid to. The best price is determined as the overall dollars per head value back to yourself, the producer. Traditionally, stock in these marketplaces are sold to these buyers on a direct basis, as a quoted price set by the buyer. Bid the Grid allows auction competition from these same buyers without the restriction of their published grid prices. Auction competition is critical for getting the best return for your stock, especially in times of tightened supply. So far, Bid the Grid has been developed for slaughter cattle sales with competition from processors. We will be developing a model for feedlots to buy on grids based primarily on live weight and dentition, with similar specifications for live export buyers. We will also develop grid sales for sheep and lambs, targeted primarily at processors, again feedlots and live exporters. With further development, this will allow all of these range of buyers to compete on the same price, regardless of their buying specifications. Like any auction, a Bid the Grid sale discovers who is willing to pay the best price back to yourself, the producer, on the day of the sale. And competition from a greater number of buyers will almost always result in a better price. Our future development of grid sales will allow a range of buyers to compete on the same stock on their preferred basis. So you may have a cattle processor buying on a grid, bidding against a live exporter on a cents per kilo live weight basis, or a sheep processor buying on a grid, bidding against a restocker buying on a dollars per head basis. All compete on the stock for the best dollars per head return to the producer. At present, the model is developed for slaughter cattle as a processor-only online sale. Processors compete on their own grids with specifications for weight, fat and dentition. What this system is designed to do is to take the guesswork out of your job deciding where you're going to send your cattle. This is an example of what you would be doing all the time looking at a direct sale model. You'd look at different processor grids to try to determine where you would get the best price for your cattle. It's easy to see where you'll get the best price for your cattle that fit the ideal specifications of the individual processor. But what about the ones that fall outside of those specifications? Very few lines of cattle consign will all fit into that sweet spot at the top of the grid. Most consignments will have some discounts applied. Here you can see that it wasn't the processor with the top price, nor was it the processor whose grid fit your cattle the best, indicated by minimal discounts, where you would get the best price. Both of these factors need to be taken into account to get the best average cents per kilogram price over the whole consignment of cattle back to the producer. The Bid the Grid platform working to determine the best price depends on the accuracy of the details on the cattle that have been provided. Buyers are protected by purchasing on their own grid. They bid to the price they're willing to pay at the top of the grid and discount cattle accordingly when they are processed. Protection for the vendor in Bid the Grid sales lies in the accuracy of the assessment. The Bid the Grid system can only determine the best price based on the specifications outlined in the assessment. If the cattle do not match the assessment when they are slaughtered, further discounts may be applicable. The AuctionsPlus Bid the Grid platform is open to all producers. Any producer can use this sale. However, you do need to use an agent, as with all AuctionsPlus sales. Your agent will be able to provide you assistance with marketing and ensuring that suitable lines are drafted for maximum competition. Some processors will have quite wide open grids and they will price all specifications. However, there are others that have quite tight grids and simply do not want cattle outside of certain specifications, and they won't bid on them if they are included in the lot. Drafting out just a few can create competition from additional buyers. AuctionsPlus can also assist you with determining more marketable lines of cattle. Assessments are submitted to AuctionsPlus by your agent. They will either weigh, fat score and mount the cattle, or they might use previous kill data as well as considerations of current seasonal conditions and management and a visual appraisal to determine specifications. The second option may be preferable for large pastoral lines where weighing is difficult, or for forward contract sales where cattle are drafted to specification on delivery. Cattle offered on a forward contract basis can be attractive to processors to shore up supply, particularly when numbers are projected to be tight. Forward contracts are also a good tool for you to lock in kill space at an agreed price. Often cattle are booked into processors on a date without a price agreement, which can make other on-farm decision-making a challenge. Bid the Grid sales allow two different options for delivery. Cattle can be delivered to the plant by the vendor, or delivery can be on-farm with the purchaser to arrange freight. Processors prefer to have cattle delivered, but most have indicated they are willing to arrange transport. Currently, there can only be the one reserve price set. You need to take freight into account when setting your reserve, depending on whether you are nominating to deliver to plant or deliver on farm. If you nominate to deliver, the reserve price will be the same for all buyers in all locations that you select to offer delivery to. Further development of Bid the Grid will allow you to factor in a freight component to all plants you nominate to deliver to, which is then factored into the buyer's bid price, so they bid on a delivered price. If delivery is to be on farm, you will need to take that into account when setting your reserve. If you are using published grid prices to decide on your reserve, remember these are generally delivered prices, and the buyer will need to factor in a freight component to their bid price if they are buying on farm. As with all AuctionsPlus auctions, for cents per kilogram carcass weight sales, the transfer of risk occurs at the point of weighing on the abattoir scales. If you are selling on a delivered to plant basis, you will be responsible for all insurances you wish to take out. If you nominate on farm delivery, the buyer will be responsible for ensuring their carrier has appropriate rollover insurance. However, you will be responsible for arranging transit insurance for individual losses should you wish to have that cover in place. For AuctionsPlus to determine the best price and applicable discounts to be applied by potential purchasers, we look at each processor's grid for varying stock classes prior to the auction. These grids are used to determine the processor's ideal specifications, as well as what discounts will be applied relative to the top price on the grid. Importantly, the processor is not locked into the top price on the submitted grid when they are bidding in a sale. Processors bid during the auction to a price they are willing to pay at the top of their grid. They compete with other processors on the average cents per kilo price across the lot after discounts are applied that is paid back to the producer. The relationship between the top price and the average price is determined by the grid factor, which is a reflection of the discounts that will be applied to your lot on that individual processor's grid. The more they will discount the lot, the lower the grid factor, and the higher their top of the grid price will need to be to get a specified average cents per kilo price back to the producer. In this example, if you have set a reserve price of 400 cents on a lot of cattle, you can see that buyer 1 has the highest grid factor based on the details in that assessment, which means they will discount the cattle the least of these 3 buyers. As the grid factor gets lower, this means that buyer 3 will apply the most discounts to this lot based on the assessment, and therefore they need to pay the highest amount at the top of their grid to get the same 400 cent average price back to the producer. This is an example of what a buyer would see during a live auction. The current price that they see is 455 cents, which is the price at the top of their grid. The 420.2 cent average price is the average price that all buyers see. This is the price that they are competing on. A question that is often raised is, how do we protect producers from being heavily discounted if a buyer prices the cattle on the wrong grid or one that does not suit the cattle? Here we can see that the average price is again 420.2 cents. However, the bid price for this buyer is very high at 496, meaning that on the grid they have applied, the cattle would be heavily discounted. Most likely, 496 cents at the top of the grid is not a realistic price point for this buyer, and they would not bid on this lot. This is the protection of the grid factor. A buyer will discount heavily because the cattle that do not suit their grid are unlikely to bid at their top price. However, if they did choose to bid, they would need to pay the 496 cents for any cattle that fit their ideal specifications. And with the discounts applied at this price, the producer would still receive the same 420 cent average price as the previous bidder, who was only paying 455 cents at the top of their grid. This is another example of what 2 different buyers would see for the same lot. On buyer 2's grid, the cattle would be discounted more heavily than on buyer 1's grid. And so buyer 2 needs to bid to a higher price at the top of their grid to get the same average price of 338 cents back to the seller. Summing up the process of a bid the grid sale from a producer's perspective, firstly, the cattle will be assessed and you will discuss with your agent an appropriate reserve price. This may be provided as either an average cents per kilo price over the consignment or a dollars per head price. The reason that the reserve must be set at an average price rather than a top price is because, based on the specifications of the cattle, all buyers will have a different top price based on their own discounts. Live auctions will take place on Mondays at 1 p.m. New South Wales time. Following the auction, your agent will receive a confirmation of sale, which will include the details of the buyer, what grid they have selected to apply to the lot, and the top price on that grid that will be applied when the cattle are processed. Following delivery, the cattle are processed over the nominated grid and priced according to the bid price with discounts applied. The important price to keep in mind following the sale is the top price to be applied to the grid. We will also provide an average price in the results. However, this average will be applicable only if the cattle kill out exactly as per the assessment. If the cattle do not fit into the grid exactly as outlined, you may receive more or less than the estimated average price, depending on where they fit into the grid. The cost for utilising the Bid the Grid system on AuctionsPlus is a listing fee of $6.30 per head for cattle ex GST. Then there'll also be your agent's commission on top of that, and that is to be agreed upon with your own agent. The key benefits to producers for using Bid the Grid primarily is auction competition and market transparency. See what processors are really willing to pay. With such a large percentage of slaughter stock going direct, auction competition is vital for price transparency. Once further developed, you'll receive competition from a range of buyers all competing on their own bid basis on the same cattle. The benefits of direct sales are maintained. Cattle don't need to be transported to yards, and you are paid for what you get once the cattle are processed. Bid the Grid gives you opportunity to promote the quality and management of your cattle. Rather than just booking in cattle on a quoted price because they fit the specifications, it really gives you the chance to promote your cattle and any management, quality and assurances that will provide buyer confidence and a reason for them to pay a higher price. You maintain a control of the price of your stock with a reserve price. The cattle don't leave your property if they don't meet this price. Buyers are not locked into a quoted price. They can price your cattle based on the details in the assessment. And this, again, will be particularly beneficial when the market is on an upward trend or when numbers are tight, and they will need to go above their quoted prices to secure cattle. Now, previous Bid the Grid sales, we have seen this happen. There's a few benefits to processors as well for utilising this system. They're buying cattle exactly as they want to buy them, pricing them over their own grid. The auction system gives them access to cattle that they might not have previously had an option to purchase, and this is particularly beneficial for smaller plants who aren't always the first ones that people go to with their direct selling options. It's a convenient way for them to buy cattle. They're saving time and money by not having to go to sale yards or to source stock in the paddock. These auctions will generally run for less than half an hour, and they also have much more detailed information on the specifications of the cattle than they would get in the yards or in the paddock. Again, they can price the cattle based on their merits. They're not locked into a price, and they can go higher. It's also a great way for them to secure forward supply at a known price. Hopefully this presentation has given you some insights into the benefits of using a grid selling platform to maximise competition and prices on your stock. If you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact me, Anna Adams, on 0432 760 436.